You want to know a secret? I really don't think that we're programmed to be poor, but I do think there's a number of things we can all do in order to increase our likelihood of reaching our life's goals. And I also think it's absolutely nuts that none of this stuff is taught in school, not in high school, not in college, and I think it should be. But let's go for a walk, and I'll share this with you over the next couple minutes. The first one I want to talk about is our mindset. I think our mindset is really key to achieving our goals. And the secret to mindset is just surrounding yourself with information, with positivity that can help you out. You know, there's a saying that we become the 5 or 6 people that we hang around with the most. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So think about what you want in life and ask yourself, are there people like this in my life? And I've shared in past videos, I grew up in a lower income home. My parents were great providers, but we didn't have a lot of extra. And you know what else we didn't have? We didn't have a lot of mentors that could teach me, you know, how do I get in a situation where I don't have to work 60 or 80 hours a week just to pay the rent and put food on the table. Those people were not in my neighborhood, but you know where they were? They were in the library. Back then, we didn't have podcasts. We certainly didn't have YouTube videos. But I could go to the library and I could read books, and I could also check out records by positive thinkers, people back in the day like Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, folks like that. And yes, I actually brought home a vinyl album. This is when I was probably 12, 13 years old, and was able to surround myself with positivity and ideas about, you know, how do I become these types of people that, you know, live in nice houses and have a more comfortable life and don't have to work 80 hours a week. That was important to me. And I think I want to caution on the resources and the podcast. You know, the truth is we have so much information available to us now. I mentioned my records before. You know, my local library had 4 or 5 of them. I'd go to other libraries, I'd get more. But there wasn't the plethora of information that we have now. And so my caution is it's easy to spend all of your time learning and not doing. So I want you to think about, you know, how do we practice these things in our day-to-day life? And how do we create skills that put, you know, if we want to make what people in the upper half of the United States make, you know, how do we get those skills to do those things? How do we become irreplaceable in the jobs that we have and have talents and skills that make it easier for us to hold on to our job and get better jobs each time we make moves in our lives? And I also want to share, you know, one of the things I picked up through this early on was, you know, in my life, you know, money was how my family paid rent and put food on the table. It was not a tool for making money. I don't think my parents ever really talked much, if anything, about investing. And so another key concept is thinking about money as a tool. Yes, it provides for your day-to-day life, but it also is a tool that money can make money. It's a key point. Okay, let's keep going. Another one that kind of builds on what I've talked about earlier is leveling up your skills. Look at what you're doing now, and are there other parts, other areas of where you're working that you could level up your skills and make more money, or change industries. I'll give you an example, and it doesn't mean you've got to go to a 4-year college. For somebody that's younger and starting off in life, maybe they're making minimum wage, maybe they're making double minimum wage, but if they go to, you know, even just a 4-week course on becoming a certified nursing assistant, there's a huge need for that. And I just use that as one example, but there's all kinds of shorter programs that we can do that will allow us to make more money. And what that allows us to do is work fewer hours so we can invest in ourselves again. So that's another important point. Another one that I think is going to be helpful is, yes, it's important to iterate. Yes, it's important to try different things, but there's a fine line. We don't want to have kind of the shiny toy syndrome where we're always looking for what's next. And so I want to encourage you to spend the time and invest the time in order to be able to focus and build some expertise, build some relationships, build your network. And that takes time. And that means you have to focus. So we have to choose very carefully what we choose to spend our time on, because obviously we want it to have positive results for ourselves. Okay, another thing to think about that I have found worthwhile is really thinking of myself not just as today's Azul, but what am I going to be like in 10 years? What am I going to be like in 20 years? And what am I doing today to make tomorrow's self easier, to make the life of tomorrow's self easier? Now, we don't want to always put off, there are folks, and frankly, myself and probably many of my audience tend to sacrifice too much today and not enjoy today. So it is a fine line, but the concept of thinking about sacrificing today's version of yourself, maybe not spending that money, maybe going to some night course that takes extra work, doing that sacrifice as an investment for the tomorrow version of yourself, while still remembering to enjoy life today. Okay, the next one I want to talk about, and this is hard for all of us, is just getting comfortable with failure. I think social media makes this harder for all of us because we see this perfect version of people, and we oftentimes don't see their failures. And I think failure is harder today than it was 30 years ago. It's not as accepted today. But the reality is, if you're pushing yourself, if you're stretching, you're likely going to fail once or twice. And you know what? You might even get fired from a job once or twice, right? If you're building your skill set, you might take that leap before you either have the skill set or the right way of thinking about things. The move from being a doer to being a manager is a real common one, right? Somebody's a great doer, they get promoted to being a manager, and maybe they were ready for it, maybe they weren't. But just because you failed doesn't mean that you can't succeed at it again in the future. There's this old proverb that talks about fall 7 times, get up 8 times. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. So I want to encourage you to not shy away from failure, to not view it as a permanent thing. And the reality is, if you're younger, you are likely going to fail at some point in your life. And you're also likely at some point in your life maybe to get fired from a job. And it's not a statement about your character. So be comfortable failing, because without failure, oftentimes there's no success. And then a really important point is I want to encourage you to optimize on life, not just your bank account, right? We have financial goals. I've talked a lot about in this video our financial goals. I'm a fee-only financial advisor. I've been doing this for 20 years. I have coached hundreds of people in their financial life, and I want to encourage you to optimize on life because it's short. And before we know it, I'm going to be 60 here pretty soon. And in a blink of an eye, if you're not 60 yet, you will be. And you want to look at the journey up to where you're at and say, that was a great journey, and I'm also looking forward to the journey going forward. And on that note, I want to encourage you to watch this video here, which is 5 reasons to retire as soon as you can. It has almost 1 million views. It's one of my most popular videos. I'll see you in there. Bye-bye.